what I tell companies is, if you think treating customers right and delivering a really good experience to them is costly, the only reason you think that is because you're working on the wrong time frame. The truth is, it's the most fruitful kind of investment you could possibly make. But the returns are in the future, not this quarter. It might cost you money today, but it's going to return many more times that tomorrow.
Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Martin, and I connect you to outstanding humans with sustainable ideas. Today's guest is Don Peppers. It's a second showing with him. We've invited him back because he is actually one of the top authorities in marketing. He's someone I got to know over 25 years ago. If you haven't heard of him, he's written over 9 books with well over 1 million copies and translated into 18 languages. He's a Hall of Famer in the Direct Marketing Association, and he's considered one of the top 100 business intellectuals. So he's deeply respected in the marketing industry, and he's somebody who I pay very close attention to. He's pretty much the gentleman that started the one-to-one marketing revolution. And today we're going to do a deep dive into one of his books that he published in 2012 called Extreme Trust. And the topic of trust is what we're going to do a really in-depth sort of exploration on how it can impact your business and take it to a new level if you address it in very innovative ways. So without further ado, let's paddle in. All right, we have a take two. Actually, literally, it's a take two with the one, the only, Don Peppers. Welcome to the show. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for being patient on the second try at recording this. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
It's funny because this is an episode dedicated to the topic of trust. And the irony isn't lost on me that you and I have, or at least especially me, had a low level of trust with the system that we're recording on, because the first time we tried using this, it didn't work. It failed us.
You're right.
So I actually reached out to the owners of the podcasting company, and they made all these assurances and so forth that, it would be fixed and upgraded and stuff like that. And they never really responded. It took me testing it personally to make sure that it was working, but that doesn't exactly make me go and want to, build my podcasting in the future on this company.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm fairly reluctant. Every time I go and show up, I'm going to have fear.
Yes, but I know you have kindly omitted to name them in the podcast. So I would say that there is hope around the bend for them.
There is. Yeah, I'm not going to lambaste them, but I think it's a really important topic because when people think of, we're talking about trust, and we have Don Peppers who's written the book on trust, and we want to talk in a level of like, people know what the word trust is, but I think there's different ways that consumers trust the business, and most people don't understand that it has an impact in so many different levels. And it's not just what you say on your website. At the fundamental bottom line is, if your product is not delivering, there's no trust and no growth. That's correct.
And now the thing is, Martha and I did a lot of research on the issue of trust. We looked at the academic literature and customer trust, having trust in the people you're buying from. That's been important since the beginning of commerce. And originally, before you had brands and mass marketing, people bought from neighbors and friends and the local butcher who couldn't move away. He had to make good if something went bad, let's say. And then when they began buying off store shelves products from companies that they didn't even know where they were, then they began, the brand name became kind of a trust mark in a sense. If something had a brand, you could rely on it. Fundamentally, if you look at the research, the idea of trust boils down into 2 things. Different academics, some have, classifications of 4 or 5 qualities or 10 qualities, whatever. But fundamentally, it boils down to 2 basic issues. I'm going to trust you if I think your intentions are good. That is, that I think you're not just trying to take my money, but that you're acting in a way that is designed to benefit me in some manner. Okay, that you have my interests at heart, at least to some extent, right? That's your intentions are good, but also competence, that you're competent to carry out those intentions. Okay, to make those good. And I think with the podcast company that we are just talking about, the issue of your lack of trust or shall we say, faltering trust in this company was based on a perception of incompetence in the actual program. The product actually wasn't going to work as it was supposed to, and so you couldn't trust it to go forward. You could think of competence as doing things right. You do things right, and good intentions is doing the right thing. Are you going to do the right thing? And those are the two qualities that basically underpin customer trust.
Well, if I could just add something, like with the podcast, they told me that I unwillingly found out that I was part of the beta program for the new version that actually failed.
Well, they probably should have warned you ahead of time.
Right. Or had me agree to it and give me a discount if I'm going to be part of a beta group or some benefit.
I'm surprised they didn't offer you some sort of benefit based on your inconvenience. I'm really surprised.
No, but what they said was in customer service, they're like, oh, yeah, we knew that's a problem. It's been a problem with our rollout. And really? I'm like,
duh.
Yeah, so something's broken there. The trust is now broken with me, even though we're using the platform right now, just because I know it. Yeah. Hopefully, it's going to work. But going forward, I'm already actively looking for somebody else to replace them because the trust is broken. Not only did it falter, but the way in which they followed up with me, it led to a deeper level of mistrust because they weren't acting on my best interests. And then when asked and almost provoked to why this occurred, only to find out that they were ambivalent about the fact and they knew about it.
That means that your experience as a customer with this company has encountered some friction. And, the most important aspect of any customer experience is that it be as frictionless as possible. And that's why trustability is what I think of as one of the 4 qualities of a frictionless customer experience, along, with reliability, relevance, and value.
Well, one of the things they could have done to create massive trust is if they actually emailed me and said, we've been experiencing problems, record at your own risk, just so you know. Like I would have gone, okay, I would have had some sort of sense of it, you know what I mean? Right. And then that they're working on the problem and just give me a heads up. But they said nothing and they just weren't surprised that something went wrong. So when you're looking at trust as a strategy, it's not just delivering on what you say. Sometimes it's like also on, there's other intangible things that build or break trust. Like what are some of those things that you think are things that people don't necessarily think about? And for me, I think right away go to, like my airline that doesn't tell me that there was a better fare. And I have to actually search for a better fare. And they just could have just said, oh, there's a better seat price right here if I'm happy to be on the phone. Yeah, right. I feel like I have to discover it or pull it out of them.
I'll tell you, the thing about trust is technology has increased the importance of trust in the customer relationship because we interact so much. Moore's Law. Every 20 years, computers get 1,000 times more powerful. There's also something that Martha Rogers and I call Zuckerberg's Law. Every 20 years, we interact 1,000 times more with others because of technology. And you just think of your life today as opposed to 1999, before there was Facebook, LinkedIn, or WhatsApp, before most people had broadband in their homes even. You interact 1,000 times more today than you did then. And the thing is, the more we interact, the more trust we demand, because trust is a key filter for all these interactions. We're assaulted, we're barraged with a tremendous amount of information today. And you use trust as a kind of shortcut filter. Can I trust this party? Can I trust this information? Think about when you turn your computer on after a couple of days and you have a 150 email messages waiting for you. The first thing you do is you go through the email messages and you delete, 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 delete. You delete, delete, delete. And the primary tool that aids you in deciding whether this email message has something in it for you is trust. Do you trust that they're trying to help you with doing something, or are they trying to get your attention so they can sell to you? So we use trust more and more. It used to be sufficient if I was a merchant and I wanted my customer to trust me. Well, let's see, I don't cheat them, I don't lie to them, I don't steal from them. That's trustworthy. But the airline didn't do that. They didn't cheat you. They didn't steal from you. They just failed to tell you that you could get a better deal. They didn't proactively tell you something that would have been in your interest. And that's what Martha Rogers and I call extreme trust in our book of the same name, Extreme Trust. We call it trustability, proactive trustworthiness. Customers increasingly expect what you expected from this podcast vendor, that they would proactively remind you that they were testing something, so be sure to check whatever. And that you would have found imminently trustworthy or extremely trustable. Let me give you an example of proactive trustworthiness. I buy a lot of books from Amazon. I try to keep up with what's happening, especially around our discipline, the customer experience discipline. So when I see a book referenced online or in a news article or something, maybe a magazine article about some aspect of marketing I ought to keep up on, I flip right to the Amazon tab on my browser. I find the book, I click on it, and it automatically comes to my house because Amazon already has my credit card number, my address. It's very easy peasy, very, very frictionless experience. Except one time, I saw this book written by a couple of professors, and I thought, boy, I ought to get that book. And I went to Amazon.com, and I found the book. I clicked on it, and I got, warning, you already bought this book from Amazon. Are you sure you want to buy another version, another copy? No, I don't want another one. I just want the one I already bought. I just forgot I had it. Now, just think about this, Scott, because it would not have been cheating for Amazon to sell me a book. It wasn't their mistake. It was my mistake. They would just be making money off of my mistake. But instead, Amazon used their database, which is obviously much better than my database, to protect me from doing something that they figured I probably wouldn't want to do. Just like the airline probably, if they wanted to be trustable, if they wanted to be extremely trustworthy, the airline would have said, you could get a cheaper fare this way, right? If the podcast company had wanted to be proactively trustable, they would have advised you in advance that we're beta testing this. We think it's a lot better than the current version, but it might do this. Just be alert. That would have been a proactive warning, and that would have increased your level of trust, even if the product had gone bonkers.
Totally.
If you'd been warned in advance, you wouldn't have had any doubt about their reliability.
Yeah, Apple does that, right? Like if I try to buy a movie or something, and I love that. It makes me just completely, and sometimes actually my kids have bought something and it's like, oh, so it's already in our library, which is kind of nice. So you're right. That is a really interesting form of trust. Apple
is very trustable. And in fact, there is a famous case where in, I think it was 2007 or 2008, when Apple was bringing out the Power PC Mac. It was a Macintosh, it was a Mac powered by an Intel chip, right? It was going to be able to do Windows faster. And so they were going to bring this out, but their sales figures had lagged in the second quarter of the year, and several analysts downgraded their stock, except one analyst upgraded their stock. And they upgraded it because they made a call into Apple's contact center, and they wanted to order the PowerPC Mac, and the contact center agent said, yes, sir, we have the PowerPC Mac, but it doesn't have the Intel chip in it quite yet. If you wait one more quarter, we're a little behind. Wait one quarter and order it then, you'll be more happy with it. And so the analyst said, what kind of company would turn down a perfectly good chance to sell a $2,000 computer because it's the right thing to do for the customer? A kind of company that's going to be around forever. That's the kind of company that'll do it. And that's what I think. I think Apple is a kind of company that, when AOL went out of business, nobody raised a ruckus at all. I mean, people barely noticed because AOL was in the business of conning customers out of money they didn't need and trying to trick them into staying subscribers for a longer period. If Apple went out of business tomorrow, you'd have rioting in every major Western city.
Well, there used to be the case with a lot of cable companies or mobile device, at least in Canada, where they have these like really oppressive contracts and make it difficult for you to switch and stuff. And, that's a form of mistrust because you feel like the only reason I'm doing business with you is because you're forcing it instead of making it based on value.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there's a marketer named Brooks Bell. She runs an agency down in the South, and I had a conversation with her. One of her first jobs, she told me, was at AOL, and she was there as a data analyst. Okay, and they were very religious about doing A/B testing on everything. They looked at the numbers. They were very, very careful about the numbers. This is in the mid '90s. And Brooks said that they're as a subscription-based internet service provider, AOL's primary index of success was customer loyalty. And she said the analysts at AOL seriously explained to her that they had devised 3 strategies through careful A/B testing, dramatically shown to improve customer loyalty. Strategy number 1 was hide the unsubscribe button on the website. And that increased customer loyalty. And technically, I suppose that's true. Customers remained longer because it was harder to quit. Strategy number 2 was when they clicked the unsubscribe button, require them to call in to unsubscribe. Okay, that increased customer loyalty even more. Strategy number 3, which increased customer loyalty even more, was the moment a customer mentions unsubscribing on the phone call, unintentionally, quote unquote, disconnect the call. AOL is the kind of company you can go on YouTube and search for AOL, and you'll see videos of people making fun of how ridiculously untrustable they were. That's why nobody cried a tear. There weren't even crocodile tears for them going out of business. Sayonara, good luck.
Yeah, it's like in Vegas where you can't see the exits, so they keep people playing the slots longer, and I kind of liken that to marketers that use the same kind of techniques when you get them into like a ClickFunnels or of some kind, not using ClickFunnels the company, but just in general, where once they're into something, it's like you can't hit the back button. It's some sort of they somehow feel like that works, sure, but that's not really building any trust.
It irritates. It doesn't. It works. It works nominally. It keeps people plugged in longer, but that's only nominal. It doesn't. It fools with their emotions in a wrong way.
Yeah, and it's not congruent. If your values are that you want to be transparent, I'm always surprised by some companies who, in every way that they function operationally, they really are trying to be trustworthy, but yet on their marketing, they're untrustworthy because they're bought into some of these techniques that they think work. Like, hey, we're going to do. Like, I know retargeting works, but to me, it's the equivalent of just badgering somebody until they say uncle and buy. How is that part of your brand if, you're trying to say we listen and we're empathetic or something? It doesn't seem that way.
Oh, I agree. And the thing is, in the product-centric world, when you didn't know the identities of your customers were not individually known at all. They were just members of an anonymous population. You have to remember that technically customers were simply obstacles that lay between you and a profit. And your goal was to relieve the customer of his money. And however you had to do that legally, that's what you did. And because the customer's feelings, their future affection or disaffection for your company mattered nothing. It wasn't something that could be measured anyway. And it was only with the digital revolution when we can actually identify customers individually and interact with them one at a time that trust became so vitally important to businesses. And a lot of businesses just haven't grown out of that old mindset, even today.
Well, and then, it's social media. Now it's gotten even more more power to the consumer to be able to
Yep.
complain publicly.
Oh yeah. You're never more than a tweet away from consumer disaster if you're a business today. And the thing is, trust has become more important for several reasons. First, it makes interactions more efficient, but it also because the world has become more transparent than ever. Okay, the world is never this transparent. Think of it, everything we see today, from the bad cop videos to WikiLeaks to the DNC emails. Let's say well, everything is today, you can never really be sure that 1,000 or 1,000,000 or 100 million people won't witness some bad episode that you go through tomorrow. And so this transparency, Joe Rogan was a character on the TV show News Radio, and he said it best. He said, dude, you can't take something bad off the internet. That's like trying to take pee out of a swimming pool.
Totally.
Exactly. You can add water, but you can't take the pee out. And in fact, that's exactly what kids do when raunchy videos and other embarrassing things go online. They increase their online activity dramatically to try to submerge those onto the second or third or fourth pages of search if their name comes up.
Interesting. Well, I look at trust and technology, the convergence there has been really exciting because there's opportunities, and the opportunity to mitigate those challenges are things like Uber. So Uber, I have so much trust. I remember calling cabs. You always wonder, like, are they going to show up? Who's going to show up? Where are they going to show up? Do they know it's me? Is someone going to take my cab? Like those things. If you've been in New York trying to hail a cab, that's like you're hailing, maybe not calling one, but with Uber, you have a transparency of seeing the whole process. And then if you're dissatisfied in the moment, you can literally right there vote with your response as you're leaving the cab. So there's a certain sort of like natural tension, not only in that case with trust, not just always on the side of the company, but also the consumer. Because there's also the cabbie can say something.
And Uber, the whole world is being Uberized. Martha and I call those trust platforms. It's Uber, it's Airbnb, it's TaskRabbit. There are a friend of mine called it the new normal. He said in the old normal, you tell your child, don't go online and make friends with any strangers, okay? And never, ever get into a stranger's car. But in the new normal, you go online, you call up a stranger, and he comes and you get in his car. And that new normal is because there is a back end, the trust platform. If you're abused or you get bad service, or that driver doesn't know how to drive or doesn't know where he's going, or screws you in some way, you can get back. You can evaluate him. You can read the driver's rating, and driver might be bad for one customer or two or three, but after that, the reputation precedes him. And that's what Martha and I call a trust platform. Same with Airbnb, or same with TaskRabbit and other types of platforms. So the world is full of those kinds of platforms now, made possible by the same digital revolution that has increased the importance of trust to begin with.
Do you see any future of where, okay, now we're talking about trust of the consumer to the business, but what about the business of the customers, differentiating their customers based on the level of trustability they have?
But don't forget, Uber drivers rate the passengers also.
That's what I mean. Like, do you see a future state of, like you walk in a store and somehow they go, oh, he has zero returns. He doesn't complain. He does total lifetime value is X. Like, I don't know. Do you see a future like that?
I see a future in which a person's prior reputation is going to play a larger and larger role in their commercial life. I don't think it's going to become Orwellian. I think it's simply a question of the digitization of the kind of prior reputation that used to exist in small towns. Everybody knew who the town bully was. Everybody knew who the town cheater was, or the world was very transparent, but only in a microcosm. And now the world is going to be transparent even in the masses of humanity that exist in a city, to say, or in the world itself.
So do you think trust is, we're talking about data and technology, and there's a lot of, like you're looking at that app on Uber as being an element of creating trust connected to the human. What about AI and sort of robots or whatever in the future? Like, I kind of feel like on one hand, if you're getting this information and you trust the information because it's brought to you by an AI or a system, is there not still some small level of mistrust until you're talking to a human? Or where do you see that connection or disconnection there?
Well, it's interesting you juxtaposition of AI and Uber, because before we leave the topic of Uber, I want to bring up something else, and that Kalanick or personality and abuses of the CEO and everybody. Uber's difficulties with their corporate culture they're well known. Personally, I prefer Lyft to Uber because I think of Uber as being a company that's been rewarded for some poisonous things in their employee, in treating their contract drivers. We never mentioned that until now. I just brought it up because you didn't bring it up. And did that ever occur to you that Lyft or other ride-sharing services that are available are more humane to their drivers and simply better places to work?
You just made a decision easier for me, because I've always go Lyft or Uber, but I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'd rather support the company that's gonna, because I think good humans gravitate to good platforms, and I want to be around more good humans.
That's a good point, and I don't want to reward bad behavior in a human. And what's interesting is those decisions we're making based on humanity. Those are things like you don't punish a bad algorithm. Okay, a naughty algorithm can't be punished, and even if you do, it doesn't learn anything from that punishment, right?
What? Okay, sorry, that's just so funny. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, you can only punish or you can only extract remorse from a human being. And so we use our human feelings to moderate how we interact with businesses. And in fact, fundamentally what we do is we deal with. We practice anthropomorphism. We think of those businesses that if I were a person and behaved this way, that's bad, right? But the businesses aren't people. Businesses are collections of rules and algorithms and business process organization issues. And so increasingly, I think the humanity in business organizations and in our lives in general it's going to come to the forefront as people increasingly realize that human empathy is what really drives commerce. Treating others the way you'd like to be treated if you were that person, the principle of reciprocity, putting yourself in the customer's shoes to try to understand what the customer would feel if they were subjected to this particular treatment or that particular treatment. Those are qualities that human beings can understand, but an algorithm or an AI or a bot, it has no feelings.
That's interesting, because if, but they're saying AI will be very humanized and so forth, but
well, it will be. And you've seen what's the Google Duplex? You've seen Google Duplex. Google it, and you can take a look at the artificial intelligence making a hair appointment for somebody and speaking in kind of a normal tone of voice, and the AI, the bot, gets somebody on the phone, and she says, well, and this is for so-and-so, and the bot says yes, and she says, well, I might have something, and the bot goes, like a human being. It's imitation humanity, and it's getting very, very good. It's getting very good. So I think we're going to get there, but if I knew it was a bot making me an offer, I wouldn't worry about hurting its feelings by turning down the offer or suggesting something more. Let me give you another example. Okay, another example. There is a company I talk with in Australia. Stop me if you heard this before. But this company said they have a contact center and they have a bunch of customer-facing people and they have a complex product. And sometimes the product doesn't work right. And a lot of times that's because the customer didn't install it correctly or didn't actually follow the rules, didn't do stuff. And when a customer calls in with a problem, the contact center agent is authorized. If let's say the customer is partly responsible for the problem, and they're calling in for a refund because it doesn't work right, but the truth is they didn't use it the right way. Mm-hmm. The agent is authorized to say at some point, if they want to, they can say, "Okay, Mr. Martin, I understand you have a problem there, but you do agree that you didn't put it together the right way first time, right? So what do you think is fair? What do you think is fair?" And then they shut up and they wait for the customer to answer. When the customer says, "Well, how about a 50% refund and I'll take it as a credit on the next item," let's say. Whatever the customer suggests, they take. But the point is, it invests the customer in the process of resolving an issue. So the customer takes ownership. It also dramatically improves the customer's level of engagement because now the customer has co-authorship of the solution. But if it were a bot asking that question, do you think they would get fair answers?
I don't think so.
I don't either. I think the customer, if they knew they were talking to a bot, they would try to game the system. They try to figure out, because why not? I mean, so I think you can imitate humanity with your speech recognition and speech simulation. You can imitate humanity with things, but in the final analysis, the bots and AI engines and machine learning needs to be tuned to imitating human empathy as much as possible. You can never get. It's not going to be an intelligent, mind. It's not going to be an organic, animate thing, but you can imitate it. So that's why. When Amazon said, "Hey, you already bought this book from Amazon. You sure you want it?" There wasn't a person there looking at my orders. It was coded in. It was a line of code that did that for me, and yet it was a line of code that, excuse me, that came out of a human empathic impulse to treat the customer the way they'd like to be treated if they were the customer. That's fundamentally where you go.
But I don't think you're ever going to build true rapport. Like, you can have a certain level of mistrust. Like, I actually think, this is my theory. Okay, so this is my totally theory. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm curious what you think. But I'm almost wondering if, like, how it's like there's a seal on food that says guaranteed 100% organic. I think they're going to see businesses with like guaranteed 100% human, empathy or something, and it's not robotic because it's going to become so close together. And that'll be a form of trust that creates a distinction or a unique point of difference that becomes a product competitive advantage,
And you may be right. You may be right. It may be that human interaction is soon going to be as prized as a handwritten letter from somebody. When's the last time you got a handwritten letter in the mail from someone, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Is there a place for combining trust where the systems are there to provide accuracy and, for example, like the airline example we used, like to go, I found another fare that was awesome, and having a human deliver the offering and build rapport, if you will, with the customer. I feel like that builds massive amount of trust because it's like accuracy of information, access, intelligent information, and then the person's meaning to help me and connect with me in an empathetic way. So,
yeah, no, I think that's possible, and I do think that when they're tuned right, algorithms and AI engines and other computer solutions can, in fact, evoke trust, but they have to be tuned the right way to respect the customer's interest. algorithmically.
So if you're going to talk to a company and go, look, you need to build a strategy around trust, how would you break that down for them?
Well, the first step I'd take is I'd talk to them about proactive trustworthiness and proactively looking out for the customer's interest. And then I'd basically start them taking an inventory of all the instances in which they are not proactively watching out for their customer's interest. And it's really not hard to find them because most companies, customer trust is not really central to the way they put their marketing programs together. Sales and maybe long-term customer value for really forward-thinking companies, but primarily quarterly sales is what drives marketing strategies, and what drives the tests that underlie these strategies. So I would ask them for things like, do you ever make money off a customer's obvious mistake? And almost all companies do. So if you know it's a mistake on the customer's part, have you ever refused to make money, instead advising the customer that they're making a mistake, for instance? Do you make more money from a knowledgeable customer with a full set of wits about him and exhaustive knowledge of the category, or do you make more money off of not so knowledgeable customers who don't really know exactly how the category is working, let's say? And most companies, no question, make more money off the unknowledgeable customers. So there are lessons you can draw from these kinds of questions. And one lesson is to design your value proposition for the most knowledgeable customer. Okay, design it so that if a customer really, really knows what you do, really, really knows the advantages and disadvantages of your products and services, that this is the option they would choose. And then that's what you recommend. And that's what you put your effort into trying to sell. So it's really not hard to do this. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. At Peppers and Rogers Group, we consulted once for a large telecom company in the United States, a mobile phone carrier. And they wanted to become more trustful. Now, mobile phone carriers do not have the best reputations for trustworthiness.
Agreed.
And when I'm speaking to a large audience, I sometimes say, raise your hand if you're confident you're on the correct calling plan for your mobile carrier. And a few hands go up. Those are from—
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm always like, why didn't you tell me it could have been a better plan?
Exactly. The mobile phone carrier employees, they all know whether they're on the right plan or not, but you don't. So this mobile carrier wanted to become more trustful, and our consultants huddled with their senior executives, and we went through all their business practices, and we identified several dozen different activities the company engaged in that were not really trustable, as in proactively trustworthy, and if they tinkered with them, just not too much, and you could really make a big difference. But then we sent an email out to their thousands of employees, about 20,000 employees, mid-level employees, right? Managers and supervisors and everybody but ground service personnel, really, and asking for ideas to be more trustworthy for.
Wow.
Okay. We got over 100 unique and different ideas. Things like employees saying, listen, I'm at the contact center and people always calling in. They want the special deal that was advertised, and it turns out that it wasn't really available on their particular circumstance. In fact, it's only available about to 10% of customers the way they did. And it dramatically decreases our trustworthiness. And so we need to advertise differently. We can't be raising customers' expectations all the time over and above what we actually offer, because that ruins their trust. So those ideas, frontline customer-facing employees, they get it. They understand. They understand perfectly what the deal is.
Well, they're closest to the friction.
Yeah. Sorry?
They're closest to the customer frustration and friction.
Yeah, they're face on with it. You're right. So we do an inventory like that, and we try to think about all the little things. And usually, there's more than enough to keep companies busy. And then when they begin implementing strategies, you can publicize them as proof points that we're more trustable. Because every time you do something like that, every time you advise a customer that, hey, you already bought this product, or this might not be right for you, or you might get you might get a better deal at competitor A or competitor B, that dramatically increases their level of trust with the company. I'll tell you one more story. I was living in Georgia, and I work a lot online. I work out of my home, and so my home office and my internet capability is very important. And one Sunday evening, I came home and I didn't have any internet, and I really needed to get something done. So I called the cable company, that provided the internet. It was Comcast. I called Comcast and I said, "Hey, listen, I don't have any internet. Can you fix it?" And they said, "Oh, yes, sir. What's your zip, Mr. Peppers? Your zip code is that? Oh, we have an outage in your area. I'm sorry about that. We're working on it. We expect it to be restored early tomorrow morning." I said, "Okay, I get it." Right? Things like that happen. They can't prevent it. So, sure enough, the next morning around 7 or 8 in the morning, it was restored, and I got my work done and so forth. But later that day, just because I'm the kind of customer I am, my career in trying to improve customer service has turned me into the world's worst nightmare of a customer for companies that do business with.
I'm sure, because you're already navigating all these different places that they're just absolutely hemorrhaging.
My standards are so high now. So I called the cable company and I said, "Hey, listen, I want a refund. I was out of my cable for a day, so I want a refund." And the rep was a little bit taken aback, but she looked at the record. She said, "Yes, sir. The computer says you were out. Let's see, you were out for. Okay, I'll put in a refund. You'll get a refund. It won't be much. It'll be less than a couple dollars, but you'll get a refund." "Okay, great," I said. "Oh, and I said, by the way, so you looked on the computer and you see that I was due a refund. So you're giving refunds to everybody who would do refunds?" She said, "Oh, no, sir. Just the ones who ask."
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's an opportunity for the cable company to improve trust. At Amazon, if you buy a video on Prime and it doesn't stream well, or there's some kind of problem with your product delivery or something, their computer knows, right? And they don't wait for you to call in so the contact center rep can see if you had a problem and issue a refund. Jeff Bezos said in his letter to shareholders back in 2013, "Hey, if the computer says you're due a refund, we don't wait for you to call. We send the refund to you." And so I told this story to a conference of Comcast executives that I addressed in my professional role about 6 months later. And sure enough, 2 years later, I was invited back to address them again, and they had actually implemented that policy at Comcast. At Comcast now, if you have an outage and it's even if it's in your neighborhood, they'll calculate it and they'll issue you a refund proactively. They don't wait for you to call in. And it doesn't really cost them anything because other ISPs, other providers have to do the same thing. They have to be competitive with Comcast. It cost them something initially, but it got them a lot of credibility with their customers. So that's an example of how people's standards are ratcheting up for trustability with the companies they deal from, and companies have responded, but expectations keep going up and up and up, and you're never going to get the end of this.
Yeah, I think there's some math in there, because if you think about if they've given this rebate, whatever the cost is, if you think about the cost of retaining a customer, how much money telecom spends on trying to keep you or keep you from defecting once your contract's up or whatever, I mean, that cost, you probably have brought down that cost significantly by just doing that activity. Like, there's probably some math in there where you could probably prove that out as being a total smart maneuver, like financially.
I know there's math in there. Martha Roger and I wrote a whole book about the math of it. We call it Return on Customer.
That's right.
It's it's the densest book and probably the least read book we ever wrote, but it's also one of the most important books because we proposed a formula for thinking about this future value that you create from your customers, from the good intentions you exhibit to a customer today, fundamentally, you think of it as the increase in the customer's lifetime value. And that, I think, the problem is the cost of this service, the cost of the refund, let's say, is immediate. It goes down in this quarter. This quarterly, it affects this quarter's profit. But the benefit, the value of the benefit is going to be next quarter and the quarter after that and the quarter after that. And so many companies, because they're all strapped to this 19th century accounting conventions that we have, where customers are not capitalized. The value of your customers is not a capital asset on your balance sheet. It's a fictional economic quantity that it exists, but it's not on your balance sheet. So a lot of companies are simply strapped to the millstone of short-term results. They got to get short-term results for their shareholders, their CFO, whatever. And I would fault the accounting system for that. What I tell companies is, if you think treating customers right and delivering a really good experience to them is costly, the only reason you think that is because you're working on the wrong time frame. The truth is, it's the most fruitful kind of investment you could possibly make. But the returns are in the future, not this quarter. It might cost you money today, but it's going to return many more times that tomorrow.
So you're bringing up a really big point, which, by the way, just so anyone that's listening, so I'm going to two things I want to say. But first and foremost, the whole topic of total lifetime value. Don, you did a brilliant 20-minute in-depth breakdown of how to calculate and think about total lifetime value in your former episode. I think it was episode 6.
Right.
So that's, so anyone that's listening, go back to that. I'll put it in the show notes because it was really one of the best 20 minutes on that topic that I've heard on total lifetime value. But what you bring up is an important point, which is short-term versus long-term thinking. If you're thinking about short-term, you're not thinking about trust because trust doesn't matter. But if you're thinking long-term, trust totally matters. I mean, you build up trust with any other human being over time. It's something that's earned and gained and grown, not something that is just given, right?
That's correct. The trust is something that it's a long-term permanent value that returns value to the company repeatedly and regularly and reliably. What I sometimes say to companies is, if you treat a customer really well, and on the basis of that treatment, the customer becomes more likely to buy from you in the future, then that treatment that you did this month, this week, that treatment that you did for the customer created value. The value it created is going to be realized in the future, maybe far into the future, the cash value of it. But the cost of the treatment you incurred today, with the treatment. And so that misalignment, poorly aligned accounting, fundamentally affects the way most businesses go to business.
Well, don't you feel there's a bit of an epidemic in short-term thinking and marketing overall?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, Martha and I wrote a book about that too. It was the rules to break and laws to follow.
I'm just putting them on a tee for you, Don. This is what I do. I help you. No, I mean, it's amazing. You like all these topics of major customer pain points and the big inflection points that marketers need to pay attention to. That's one of the reasons I love you on the podcast. And I'm so grateful and honored that, we've built a relationship and done stuff together over these years, is because you really are tackling some of the things, and not just from saying, hey, you need to do this. You actually break it down and how you, both mathematically and just strategically, why it makes sense to do, so you can move the boardroom.
Yeah, short-termism is an endemic problem in all Western market societies right now, because we don't have the realization, much less the tools, to deal with the fact that there's such a thing as customer goodwill in the future. There were a lot of people who knew that the financial crisis was coming when it came. They knew in advance. And those were a lot of the bankers and traders who were putting these collateralized debt obligations and other complicated derivatives together, knowing that it was a house of cards. You ever heard the term IBG, YBG?
No, I haven't.
Because it was a popular texted phrase back and forth among these traders. If a trader was putting together a deal, let's say, that wasn't really very good for the customers, but was going to really pay a lot of money on the front end. They're getting commissions, they're getting some front end fees and so forth. And if another trader had doubts, let's say second thoughts, hey, this can't be stable in the long term, he would get a message back on his phone, that text message, don't worry about the future, IBG, YBG. I'll be gone, you'll be gone. It was a common phrase. And I think that IBG, YBG attitude is something that sort of characterizes a lot of marketing executives in the world today as they think about, let's just make the numbers this quarter. In the long term, I'll be gone, you'll be gone. Okay, IBG, YBG. And I think that mentality, that short-termism at all cost mentality, is very, very poisonous in our economic system. Very poisonous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally focused on this topic in my book, Groundswell, and I see this environment of everybody just almost being so excited and intense about like grow quickly and 10x this and do all these hacks and do it at all costs for growth's sake. But really, in the end of the day, you're not building trust. You're not actually building a foundation for growth. And these are the things that I think most people in business are getting tripped up with, that some of the best growth happens from slowly building trust over time. It's like it'll beat out any of these short tactics over the long run. And it's like it's just kind of gotten out of hand. It just feels like in the last little while.
Well, I agree, and it's one case in point. I'm living in California now, so it's going to take Wells Fargo. Recently Wells Fargo went through this major customer disaster where fundamentally what was happening was they were asking their line management and frontline customer people to open new accounts for customers, and basically then they were evaluating them and promoting them and sometimes firing them on the basis of whether they were successful in opening new accounts. In a purely analytical sense, it is true that a customer, a consumer who has more than one account is likely to be more loyal and more profitable for the business. But this is analogous to what AOL was doing with hiding the unsubscribe button. It's when you pay people to try on the basis of how their customers behave, you encounter what's called Goodhart's law. Any metric that becomes a target is no longer a valid metric. And in fact, what was happening was a lot of their people were putting consumers down for new accounts that they'd never signed up for. And the truth is, it didn't cost consumers much money, really. It wasn't a terrible fraud financially, but it was a terrible fraud in terms of trust. And customers, the consumers, of course, were upset that they had accounts opened in their names, even if they didn't pay for it. It did affect their credit scores and so forth. And it was a terrible black eye on Wells Fargo. So you go through this disaster caused primarily by a maniacal focus on short-term results, right? And now Wells Fargo wants to recover trust. They want to recover the lost trust that of their customers. And how do they do that? Well, they need to offer proof points. They need examples of how they can be trusted. And I was at a conference, and somebody took me aside and showed me their Wells Fargo banking app and pointed out a feature that was obviously designed to try to improve customer trust. It was a really interesting thing. She showed me this page that she opened on her mobile app. It had their banking fee, their monthly fee, and there was a little tab. You could click on this button if you want to see how not to have to pay this fee, how to avoid this fee. Here are the tips on how to avoid paying this fee. I would argue that is an example of a company trying to win back the trust of its customers by, one small step at a time, trying to proactively watch out for the customer's interest. And I think that's a very good lesson for everybody.
Interesting. So in my mind, when you tell me that example, I'm also thinking about like they could have maybe proactively almost like done a communication about the things that they did wrong. It's like any relationship, like you build trust when you just kind of come clean. So you're
Yeah.
accountable to your actions, but here's the steps I've taken to move forward. It's hard to not trust somebody that just like levels the playing field. You know what I mean?
I agree 100%. And that's why in a human relationship, being vulnerable is so trust inspiring. If you talk to a psychologist about how to have an empathetic conversation with someone and really get to the bottom of some problem, one of the first pieces of advice you'll get is show your vulnerability, show your weakness, show what you feel bad about, or that the mistake you made. Admit it freely, and just roll over on your back and raise your paws, and you'll get your tummy rubbed. And that's kind of what a business has to do if they want to improve the trust their customers have in them, especially after some sort of egregious abuse like Wells Fargo had.
Really great point. I wonder if trust is really, if you distill it down, is a demonstration of care.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
do.
a caring attitude, right? Like if I care, it's like you can't, don't like people don't care what you say until they know how much you care. So that's a form of level of trust because I want to build rapport with you because I know that you care about me.
Right, right, and I think it would be very hard to find an analog for this in the world of AI or bots. It'd be very hard to find an analog for this even in neoclassical economics, where people are thought of as rationally always self-interested people trying to maximize their own gain. When in truth, that's not what people are. I don't always try to maximize my own gain. I care for other people. I watch out for friends and colleagues and some people that I don't even know, never saw before. If I was only trying to maximize my own gain, I'd never give anything to a charity organization. I think what I'm trying to say is that rational self-interest only goes so far in explaining people's economic motivations. Those are there is a level showing a level of care for others is something that has evolved in the human race. It's made us into the social species that we are. It's created the civilization around us that feeds us and clothes us and keeps us warm in winter days.
So for me, that like automation and AI, my hope and belief, or I think the unique point of difference would be using that to scale care, to scale
Exactly.
trust.
Very, very good point. And I think that's a very good point. And that's what Amazon is doing when they built the line of code that said, hey, you already bought this book. You sure you want to buy another one? That's an example. When they automatically send you the refund, that's done by computer. People don't scan through your records and decide whether you do a refund. They're doing it by computer, but they're putting into the computer trustworthy activities that the way a human being would treat another human being that they cared for.
And it's the word of mouth. So that to me is the new must have for growth because everybody's obsessed with growth. And if you look at, for example, like if I'm going to go go to a restaurant or I go on Yelp or something, I'm really interested in what people say about the company. So that's like a form of someone caring enough to tell me what they liked. Even if they disliked it, they're still caring because they're kind of saying like, I don't want to prevent someone from having this experience. But when you have trust with somebody and they tell you about their experience, that's like a totally different level of commitment. It makes it more frictionless. And I feel like this whole topic of trust is like, I feel like we're kind of going back to that small town experience where it's like, you're really looking to also scale your personal trust with call it your internal tribe, which is kind of getting bigger in a way that gives you the ability to buy and trust what you're buying and not believe the marketing. I feel like there's like a big disbelief anymore in marketing messages. They just want to go, well, what do you think? Or looking at the reviews before even looking at the features.
I think you're right. And I think that the future of marketing is going to be much more honest than it is today or was yesterday. And I think that's due to customer demand and business response. And I think it's a virtuous cycle. The more trustworthy I am, the more customers come to expect it of others, and the more they come to expect it of others, the more trustworthy they're going to be. And so it's going to be a competitive. Tool.
I think that's a great note to end on. I mean, having that sort of hopeful outcome that we're going to actually improve, because I feel like, hopefully the dark times of marketing and this type of activity is coming to an end, and the hopeful future. Because I think people's level of consciousness around this, or even just tolerance, is like they're expecting more, and we expect more just as humans to kind of from ourselves. So I feel like, that is a really hopeful message that marketing will improve in a way that's actually going to serve us as humans, not sell to us.
I agree with you, Scott. I agree with you, and put me in the optimistic camp. I believe the world is getting better, steadily, constantly, but a little irregularly. And all I want to do is try to make the world safer for customers faster.
Wow. Well, with that, you have done that. You've built an entire career on that. I mean, you're the OG of customer experience and personalization and all these things. I mean,
your lips to God's ears, man.
What's that?
I said your lips to God's ears. Thank you.
Pouring honey into your ears. So Don, thank you again so much for being on the podcast again. And I'm going to put you on the spot. Can we do another episode on another topic again?
I talked a little bit about what we're doing here, so I'd be delighted to.
That's amazing.
The same story over and over again.
Okay, cool. So, and I didn't have to say the safe word, which is great. So do you want to just tell everybody where they can follow you online?
Well, I blog regularly on LinkedIn, and my email address is dpeppers@cxspeakers.com. CX Speakers, all one word. I will pay attention to all the emails. Feel free.
Don, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Scott.
I really appreciate being on the show. Your insights are amazing, and your episode has been like wildly trafficked, which is great, and downloaded. So thanks again. This is going to be a really big episode. And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast. My email is scott@groundswell.marketing. Throw up a review, give me a note. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, mahalo.